Let's get to politics. Something different for you here. Donald Trump and the NRA are, according to reports, essentially in agreement on this no-fly, no-buy list. That means if you're on the no-fly list, you can't buy a gun. Got it. Here's Steve Hayes, who was actually put on the broader terror watch list. I want to talk to you about that, Steve. This is outside the regular course of politics here. What happened to you?
Yeah, it was an interesting episode, to be sure. I had taken a one-way flight to Istanbul with my wife to participate in a cruise for Hillsdale College. We flew to Istanbul, took the cruise to Athens, flew back from Athens. And when I returned to the United States, the first time I presented my boarding pass, well, I was not allowed to check in online, and then I presented my boarding pass that I got at the airport. And it caused, you know, great alarms to go off. They shut down my lane. They did this hour-plus search. It was quite an ordeal, and then at last I was on the list for several weeks, for 6 weeks.
Wow. How did you get off?
Well, how I got off was actually a very funny story. Bret Baier was hosting Homeland Security Secretary Jeh Johnson for an interview on Special Report. And Bret was talking to him mostly about illegal immigration, and I talked to Bret beforehand, and I said, hey, you know, I'm on this list. I've talked to DHS, and they send me to the FBI. I've talked to FBI, and they send me back to the Department of Homeland Security to try to get off. I can't get off. It requires me to go to the airport several hours earlier every time I fly. Why don't you ask Secretary Johnson about this? And Bret, of course, you know, played it like the pro that he is, you know, looked at Secretary Johnson very squarely in the eye and said, you know, I have this regular panelist, Steve Hayes. Mr. Secretary, do you think Steve Hayes is a terrorist? And Secretary Johnson, I mean, I suppose he can't afford to joke around about this, but he looked right back at Bret and said, you know, Bret, I can't speak to Steve's individual situation,
no.
leaving the possibility open that I was, in fact, a terrorist.
But look, in all seriousness, this is the problem with no-fly,
exactly.
no-buy. Because you are deprived of your rights to buy a gun, if that's what you want to do, not by an elected politician, but by a faceless bureaucrat. And once you're on the list, you can't go. You can't go to court to get yourself off that list, can you?
Yeah, you can. I mean, they have procedures set up to get yourself off the list, but as I mentioned, you know, I couldn't even get the right bureaucracy. I mean, I filled out a form on the DHS website. I called DHS to follow up. I talked to the press offices and said, hey, I mean, you guys really think I'm a terrorist? And the bigger problem to me, Stuart, is that they have these broad sweeps to identify potential terrorists. I mean, literally the only reason I made the list was because I took this one-way flight from Washington to Istanbul, and Istanbul is a major transit point for people coming from the West who want to go to Syria and fight alongside ISIS. Well, you shouldn't be blocked from buying a gun because you take a one-way flight to a suspected place, even if they're okay, even if it's wise for them to add scrutiny to somebody who makes that kind of a trip. You can't deprive them of their constitutional rights, which I think is what you're talking about in this situation.
That's the story. Well, look, Steve, we're very pleased to have you back. As far as I'm concerned, you're all right. Anybody who goes on a cruise for Hillsdale College is all right with me.
It was a good cruise. It was a good